I've got a really interesting show today. I am very happy to have in the studio Robert U. Joslin. And I found out about Robert U. Joslin. He does amazing work. He's the president of Hawaii Claims Adjusters, and he also is tied into the national organization. You're the secretary.
You're right. I'm the National Board Secretary for the National Association of Public Insurance Adjusters.
And you have a very long history here on Maui, but your roots go back, way back, to the early days in Texas, which is Hurricane Lane back there. Well, not to be confused with the lane here, but you had so many hurricanes going through, and you learned a lot about what is really needed for people in dire situations. You went through a couple of major hurricanes in Texas, right?
Yes, ma'am, I did. I was a commercial contractor and was working on Alicia at the time in '83 in Freeport and Brazoria County, Texas, which is just south of Galveston. Our family heralds from that area. My father was a NASA engineer. So I lost everything April 22nd, 1984, in Clute, Texas, in a fire and was denied coverage.
Really?
Essentially, that's how I ended up on Maui with my brother, Mark Joslin.
So you have a lot of important information we're going to talk about, but coming into where you got involved here, you actually, the first hurricane that you were involved here was with Iniki, going back to that was 1992, I believe.
1992, correct. And it kind of like was, Hawaii kind of lost its larger national coverage because Hurricane Andrew had hit that same week in Dade County, Florida. So that got all the national news, and we got sort of the second page on everything, unless you lived here.
Yeah.
But that's when I first met a public adjuster. I was looking over the Sheraton property in Poipu, and I was approached by a gentleman who said, "Can you help me with numbers out here?" I said, "Sure." And so I helped him put together the numbers for the Sheraton, rebuild the Sheraton in Poipu back in '92.
A nice hotel.
That came out okay.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot that people don't know that they should know. I think there's a lot of confusion about the difference between someone who sells you insurance and someone who's an insurance adjuster. Explain the different levels of involvement from when you, and I think you have to buy insurance if you own a home, right? Isn't that one of the prerequisites when you get a loan?
Yeah, the mortgage companies need to be named clearly as a recipient. And that kind of came up later, 70s, I want to say, if I recall correctly, because there was people were getting insurance checks and then taken off the Bali, and it was like, well, wait a minute. So the mortgage companies were exposed, so they insisted that when a property closes, that they're named in that policy until such time as the loan is satisfied.
Mm-hmm. Now, what's really important and what you understand is that Hawaii is a very different situation, obviously. We notice this with the volcanoes. Very different than the rest of the mainland. Maybe Alaska might have had one or two situations like that. But you really were called into action in some rather horrific situations that happened with the lava flow on the Big Island. And maybe you can give us a little details about what happened there.
Well, let me put it chronologically how it kind of occurred. That was really the May 3rd eruption of 2018. So I was asked to speak to do a webinar for what's called LASH, the acronym for Legal Aid Society of Hawaii. And when you have a question or any kind of legal thing, you just want somebody to kind of point you in the right direction, you can call Legal Aid Society of Hawaii. And they then can point you in whatever directions or try and answer your questions. And it really helps the less fortunate that don't have the money when some of these things happen. So I did a webinar, and a bunch of the attorneys were on the line. And once the line was off, the webinar is over, I started getting phone calls from some of these attorneys directly. So I was asked then would I consider going to helo and into the courthouse over there where the jury pool room was, and give a broader sense of coverages and losses and what is covered, what isn't covered, and to helo attorneys that were over there. And I said, yes, of course I would. So I believe we had 28 attorneys over there. It was about a 3-hour nice answer question back and forth with them. And from that, we were then asked if we would do a public forum. So we did a public forum out in Pahoa at a community center, and that, I think, was 284 people showed up. They were hanging out the windows and back in the fields. And then we were asked to do another one, a follow-up one after that one.
And this is still why it was all active.
It's completely active. I mean, we were the one place you just, it was the red glow behind us where the community center was, which later became the massive Fissure 8, literally new volcano. So that's sort of how that all transpired. What we brought in United policyholders out of San Francisco, and they're the volunteer side of the organization nationwide.
There's a volunteer side.
There's a volunteer side.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so if you had the famous Oakland fires of 20 years ago or so, they got their start there, and it's run by an excellent Amy Bach, who's the executive director, mostly attorneys, because they want to help people, but this is their time of giving it back, and a lot of other volunteers. So we brought them in and put them up for the 2 other forums, so that everybody can realize there's a lot of do-it-yourselfers. Hawaii's like, we got a lot of do-it-yourselfers.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that, and so I said, look, let's get them over here. They can help you further, and if you really have a problem, just bring us in. And that's always been our premise. I lost everything. Nobody's there to help me. So I didn't want that to be the same situation here in Hawaii.
And you now are even on the ethics board of the national branch.
Yes, I was asked to be on that back in, I want to say it was 2011. I've been on the ethics chair, the committee. I am now the national board secretary for NAPIA, National Association of Public Insurance Adjusters, and Hawaii Public Adjusters, which is my firm. There's 4 of us that are public adjusters, all in the company. One is inactive right now, and there's one other public adjuster that's an independent out here in Hawaii, and we know of no other public adjusters.
But all the insurance claims that most of the people you were talking to, and probably most people are here in Hawaii, are from national companies that are not Hawaii-based companies. Is that correct?
So they're called CAT adjusters, and it's short for catastrophic loss adjusters. So they'll come in from Alabama or Florida or Arizona, and they'll do an estimate, then they'll get on a plane and they'll leave. And that estimate isn't based upon the cost of stuff here in Hawaii. We've never found it. Well, let me say this. Up to this point, we have never got a claim where we got less than 100% more on the claim than what the CAT adjuster said it was. And there's no way they're going to know how much drywall cost in Pahoa or up at the North Shore of Hawaii. They just don't know. So they kind of, here's the money, we know at least you're due that, and then we leave. And then you're stuck to argue. And that's when we typically get the call. It's like, okay, I've had enough. I can't keep doing this.
But how do people know to call you?
Well, we're more mainland people are familiar with public adjusters. More business people are familiar with public adjusters. So, and through shows like yours, is that our word gets out. When the first time the eruption and the hurricane Estelle hit over on the Big Island, radio station did interviews with us then just for that local market over there. And that's essentially how it happens. And then the forums, we get asked to speak. I hold the only CPPA certified professional public adjusting tag issued by the Institutes for Insurance, which is the highest schooling for insurance.
Now, a lot of people didn't realize, and were told they could not be covered because it was volcanic. There were other issues also, the sulfur damage, etc. And we're told that it wasn't covered in their policy. Is that correct?
That's correct. Over half of them were denials that we reversed.
And you came in and said, hey, wait a second, and you found a loophole. No,
I found correct language.
You found correct language,
huh? So let's talk about language. That's one of the very important things. These types. Now, I'm not an attorney, so please don't call up and ask for any legal. Got plenty of attorneys out there. I get asked to interpret from attorneys. I get asked to be an expert witness. I get asked to handle appraisals, which is something we'll get into a little bit later. The language is such that it's got to be readable. So, you know, if you're reading something that looks like a legal contract that's beyond you, get advice. Get somebody to read it for you. Mm-hmm. And in our case, we are trained that way. You go through the schoolings for it. So when we say we represent your financial interests in an insurance claim, that's the authority granted to public adjusters by our state legislator and signed in by the governor years and years ago. It just sat there. The state did not have a public adjuster. And I actually got involved in it simply because I knew some of the attorneys that were here in Wailuku, who then later went to work for Governor Lingle up at the state. And one of those attorneys was J.P. Smith. J.P. Smith was corp counsel here. And some of his buddies and me knew each other. And I'll never forget sitting down at the old Lone Star on Lower Main with him sitting there. He's a teetotaler. He's a really great guy. And I'll never forget him turning to me and he says, you know what this place needs, Robert, is a public adjuster. He goes, we don't got one. And that's when he was going off to be the insurance commissioner. He did a fine job at that. Yeah, that was Chicago Joe Wolowski, and Nelson Bedeful, who became labor. But the four of us sat there, and I thought, oh, I wonder what really. And so I actually went and took the test, and passed and became the first one in the state that lives here that's a public adjuster.
Now, the reason we're talking is because there was this fire. It was a scary fire. I mean, and a lot of people, immediately started getting, worried yesterday when there was that fire that happened in my meadows, going, oh no, not again. But thank God we have a great fire department, and we need them. These guys are heroes. But it was looking really bad. It was just a couple weeks ago, and it was scary. I mean, it was burning right down the center of Maui, and it could have gone lots of ways. But one thing, I was on the air from, it was about 4 o'clock to 10 o'clock, so 6 hours. And the thing that was happening was interesting is, we certainly were trying to keep track of what was happening with the fire, with the help of a lot of the public. But there was a lot of smoke as well. I mean, tons of smoke. I mean, people, couldn't breathe. There were people that had to stay inside. There were people that really didn't want to go driving or anything because the smoke was so thick they couldn't see well on the roads. So there was a lot of issues going on, plus our friends at the Maui Humane Society. The fire came right up to the containers there, right there at the Maui Humane Society, literally right up to their back door. Thank God the firefighters really made a stand there and protected the buildings. And they, of course, were evacuated and didn't realize till they came back how close, literally right to the containers in the back of their buildings. So this fire was very, very intense, and it was one of the biggest situations we've had. 92,000 acres burnt at that time, and then 80 acres were burnt yesterday. In situations like that, you come in and say, gosh, people may not be aware that there might be some issues that they have that they might not think is going to be covered by their insurance, but maybe, just maybe, it could be.
True. Most policies are under the HO3, which is a homeowner 3 policy, which you'll hear is it's nicknamed All Perils. It's called high full coverage. People say that. I get replacement cost. And all those are under an HO3, which is preferred by all the mortgage companies, and that's why you end up with that HO3. But they're happy to sell you something cheaper that doesn't have as good as coverage. So if you've got an HO3, you're in good shape, and we always recommend that people have HO3s. Now, if you have a condominium, you need an HO6 because an HO3 is for a standalone house. But this is going to get way into agent issues. But I have no issues with agents other than agents that never see their client ever. A lot of them, they only get the paperwork to a closing and never ever even drive by the house. So they'll say, well, it's a $300,000 loan, so we're going to give them a $300,000 coverage. But they could have bought an $800,000 home, and that's the problem. So I'd say one of the biggest things that we see is underinsurance. And people don't understand it. Well, who do you buy from? Well, I buy from very good brokers, and I always believe in using the Hawaii broker, who produces the policy, and I tend to favor the independents. And the independents are the independent adjusters, the independent agents that will go out and shop it for me. And I said, this is the coverage I want, and here's my deductible. And I'm in a position that I can have a higher deductible, which means my premium is less. So some people go, I can't afford $100, so they have $100, and they charge the most for those policies. So people go, well, how do you get the premium down? I said, up your deposit. I mean, up your deductible, and that's the easiest way to get lower premiums, and then up your limits. You can even offset it and get correct coverage with a higher deductible.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah, that's how it works. It's sort of the yo-yo in the business. So, and when you see policies where they have machinery insurance, they have all these different little coverages that I love my agent. I don't want go anywhere else. I love my agent. And if you don't have an elevator in your house, what do you need machinery coverage for? Right? If you got and you're paying for it. I've seen people pay for these things that are like that go on and on and on, and it's worthless. You don't even have that what you're insuring. So, we will, after a claim, we will review that, get back with their agent, and if that agent won't cooperate, we'll just send them to one of the agents we know that are very consumer friendly.
So, say in this last fire, someone had a car or a tractor. There were some actually building tractors, I heard, and different things out there and the different properties that burnt down. Maybe even people like the Maui Humane Society, because those containers probably pretty much melted inside. I don't know. But there also may be more than just something that burnt down that people might need to know about, right?
Yeah, so on those HO3 policies, typically you have 5% for landscaping. And people,
really?
They don't know that because it's not anywhere in your declaration, your renewal, but buried in what's called additional coverages or other coverages. Back in the policy, you'll see 5% for lawns, plants, and trees.
I didn't know
5%.
that.
So if you have a $500,000 policy, what's 5% of that, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of the claims that happened during Lane, the first argument was, well, it was hurricane, so it was your wind policy. And he said, no, you're wrong. The causation was fire and smoke. The hurricane is what would rip your roof off, but because it fanned the fire, it's not the basic causation issue. So one of the first couple ones that we went to get involved in there, the adjusters were trying to push the higher deductible, the 5%, the 10% deductibles that are named wind policies or typical hurricane policies are much higher deductibles. So they were pushing that, and we had to come in and undo that and say, no, this is the $500 deductible because you got two policies in play here. The causation is the fire and smoke, not because it was Hurricane Lane.
And that language and understanding, it's so important. If you're just tuning in, I'm talking to Robert Joslin. Robert U. Joslin's the president of Hawaii Public Adjuster, and he's also NAPIA, serving as one of the 12 nationally elected board members for that organization, and he's also on the Morals and Ethics Committee there, and really is there to try to help you, and I should probably mention your website too, Hawaii Public Adjuster, not with an S, hawaiipublicadjuster.com. This is very important for everyone to be aware of. Now, it's hard information for people to understand. You brought up a point to me, I was talking to you earlier about the fact that there were certain rules that these claims and the paperwork were supposed to be written to be easily understood, and the rest of the country it's written as if read by a 10th grader, but here in Hawaii it's written for college level people, and so it might be hard for some people to even know what they've got in their insurance policy.
Right. So we interact with the insurance department. Essentially, our boss as all adjusters. Well, I shouldn't say that actually, but in this case, public adjusters, we respect our commissioner. He's the front lines to dealing with the consumers. So we see ourselves as the advocate. Matter of fact, I have a letter from 2008, I want to say it was, where the attorneys in the department were getting concerned how some of the insurance adjusting firms were handling a claim that we had at the Wavecrest over in Molokai. And they kept saying, hey, he can't do this, the public adjuster, he can't do that, and he can't do that. And so they explained the world to those adjusters why we are who we are. Mm-hmm. We have a higher bar. We are bonded. We have fiduciary responsibilities. All those kinds of things that a normal adjuster doesn't have. Normal adjusters, which are the independent adjusters, insurance companies come out, they hire them, and then they go get a claim, and then they turn it back in.
So what people should do is if they think, well, maybe this might include some issues for me. And one point I should bring up, there was something I was not even aware of, that on the Big Island, there was this whole issue with the sulfur. Was it called SO something?
SO2, sodium dioxide. So think of it like battery acid, but it's airborne.
And that was something that you got people compensation for.
I got them 100% compensation, and some we are working with. Okay, so let's picture this. We had a couple of nicknames for it. It doesn't mean, it's just simply because we when we were all talking about it, we were trying to picture the situation instead of these long dissertations of what's going on. So as the lava was flowing, we nicknamed Alamos. They were surrounded. Everything looks good at the house, but eventually the lava's going to take it. They're going to lose. Then we had donuts. And donuts are where the house is standing. The lava went around it, but you can't get to the house. So we were helicoptering in some of these places. And the issue was with the SO2. I said, no, wait a minute. I said, I'm going to total the whole house. He said, you can't total the whole house. There's no physical damage. I said, your policies on the very first paragraph of what you cover states direct physical damage or loss of use of a tangible asset. And I'm going to go right there with it. That line right there gets that full policy face payout. So we've got some of those. So.
Very good point. Very good point. Well, you brought up a lot of interesting points, and people should be able to contact you and find out more. And there might be a lot of questions that people have. Is there a number that they can reach you at?
Sure. You call it. Our main office line is 808-856-3043. We are here in Mailuku, but we go to all islands. I'm in. Let's see. Thursday on an appraisal, which is a higher level of adjusting. We get judges involved to make a ruling, and that's very good because that's the levelest the playing field can get without actually getting lawyers involved. I mean, I'll tell you right now, we definitely bring in lawyers, but if I can get somebody that's neither one of the adjusters, not the public adjuster, not the independent adjuster, not the insurance adjuster, and then I would then represent the interest of what went on the policyholder side, and the insurance company would then select somebody to represent their side, taking all the original people that were arguing out of the picture, and then we do what's called an appraisal. That's in every policy. And that appraisal then says the policyholder is going to name somebody, the insurance company is going to name somebody, and then those two people named pick a neutral. So think of it like an arbitration.
Well, and that's really... after talking to you, I realize you're an advocate as well. And I think people might really be aware of some things they weren't aware of before. We're in hurricane season. Weather has been changing. We have been seeing, if you watch the news or hear the news, hear on the radio at all, you certainly hear about disasters like we've never heard of before. So it's really good to know what you do need and be prepared. Like a Boy Scout, for anything that might, eventuality that might come. We never would have thought we would have to worry about the fires we did. And we certainly want to make sure you're covered in case there's a hurricane coming as well. So people can contact you and actually try to get the language they need for any future coverage that might be happening for hurricanes as well, right? Very
true. The issue of hurricanes are named windstorms, really. You can have a storm.
They're called windstorms, huh?
It's a windstorm name. And so what's this named by the Central Pacific Hurricane Center? Another policy takes over it, not the one you have, and that's your windstorm policy. So be careful with those ones because a lot of these they're time sensitive. You've got to make a claim within a certain amount of time. You got to give notice. Prompt notice is one of the requirements. And the word prompt is when did you find out you had damages? And that's really how we look at it. Is when did you find out? You may have had a hailstorm 6 months ago and your house is now leaking. When did you find out it was from hail? Now there's prompt notice. Give them prompt notice. So,
interesting. Yeah. Lots of loopholes and lots of details people don't know about. And so, folks, if you think that you need some help, give Robert, he's really a wonderful guy and very, very, very experienced in this. Give him a call at 856-3041, and that's 808-856-3041. You can go to Hawaii hawaiipublicadjuster.com. I'm really glad I got a chance to meet you and talk to you. I learned a lot that I didn't know about today. And people, if you think that, there's no way your policy covers this, you might want to think twice. Your policy may cover it, and you just didn't know it because you were never told it. You never read the fine details, and you didn't know how to interpret the details of your policy. Is that right?
That is absolutely correct.
Well, thank you so much for coming in. So nice meeting you, Robert.
Well, nice meeting you, and everybody out there, have a good day.
Thank you.